Hello and welcome to CommConnections, Cornell University's Department of Communication podcast. My name is Georgina Gonzalez, senior in the Comm department, and today I sat down with Marc Silberman, Comm Advisory Board member and partner at Comcast Ventures for our first ever audio and video podcast. During this podcast, we jumped into topics of early career advice, navigating the world of venture capital, the importance of networks, and maintaining a healthy work-life balance.
Marc, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to CommConnection. I've been at Cornell now for about 3-4 years, and every single time there's a Comm event, you seem to be a familiar face from the alumni. So thank you for coming back and always helping us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What brings you back to Ithaca this time around?
So this trip, I just joined a group called Cornell University Council, which is kind of a university-wide group of alumni who they bring together to kind of join up with the board of trustees to help with different types of strategic initiatives. So this is my first year, so we have kind of an annual weekend or 2-day meeting. So I'll take any excuse to come back up here.
Yeah.
So I'll take it.
Is it important for you to always come back and sort of be involved with the campus?
When I can. It's become a little bit harder. I'm sure my wife will kill me for continually talking about my now 18-month-old little boy at home, but it's become a little bit harder to come up as much as I would like, but I live in New York City, so it's really close.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
Fatherhood, how's it treating you?
Wild, crazy, exciting, all of it. But no, it's the best.
Yeah.
Usually I'm kind of sad to leave Ithaca and have to go back to like normal. I'm much more of an outdoors person, but to go back to New York City life. But this is like one of the times I'm very excited to go back home. But no, it's great.
That's awesome. I mean, I want to jump into a little bit of how you grew up and where'd you grow up? What were family dynamics like for you, and how has your upbringing kind of led you to where you are today and who you are today?
Yeah. So I grew up outside of New York City on Long Island, so in the suburbs of New York, probably with a lot of other Cornellians who seem to be from in and around my town. From a dynamics perspective, I grew up in a single-parent household. So my dad actually passed away when I was 7 years old, so I was raised, I have an older brother, Jeff, and we were both raised by my mom. So we're very... and she was a kindergarten teacher for most of her career, so would wake up every morning, drive to Queens, teach kindergartners, come home, have to deal with 2 crazy, annoying sons at home. So I still can't figure out how she did it. But all of that had a lot of kind of freedom due to mostly just her not having enough time to deal with us. So I think that freedom and kind of autonomy to do lots of different things was pretty instrumental, but that was, I guess, the biggest part of my dynamic was growing up in a single parent household.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear. I relate. My mom also works with kids and always has worked with kids as I grew up, and I think that placed a lot of value in education for me just because I saw her be so passionate working with kids. Do you think that was similar for you?
I think so. I mean, just I'd have the chance to go with her to her school when I was in high school, and she taught in Queens, New York. So like a little bit like I grew up in the suburbs, where it's just a different types of backgrounds in the town where I grew up compared to in Queens, which was much more diverse. So kind of seeing that through kind of firsthand and going to her school, even in kindergarten, was pretty illuminating.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and as sort of time progressed and it was time for you to apply to college, what sort of drew you to Cornell?
Yeah, I wish I had, it's funny, being here this weekend, we were asked that question at one of our kind of meet and greets for the council, and some people had these amazing stories that they came here and some divine intervention brought them to Cornell, and I had none of that. Much more matter of fact. So I wanted to be a journalist when I was in high school. I was like the nerdy editor-in-chief of my high school newspaper. Thought I'd be the next great columnist for the New York Times. So was looking at schools where I could study kind of journalism, communication. I remember driving up to visit Syracuse with my brother. and we drove right past Ithaca on the way up, and he was like, "Oh, do you want to go take a look at Cornell?" And I kind of laughed. I said, "Why would I want to do that?"
Yeah.
There were kids from my high school that those were the type of kids that went to Cornell, and I didn't feel like I was one of those kids. So we drove kind of up on past and up on back. I think the big kind of catalyst was a few things. It was Cornell was pretty close to home.
Yeah.
It was a great school, and lucky enough for me, the communication major happened to be within a school at Cornell that was just a tad bit less expensive for New York State residents.
Yeah.
So all of that kind of came together with a little actually nudge from my grandmother, who said, if you apply and get in, we'll figure out how to pay for it.
Yeah.
So I actually applied without ever visiting, and I applied early decision, which was, in hindsight, kind of terrifying. But thankfully, I knew pretty quickly after my first visit, after I got in, that this was it's going to be pretty good. So, nothing kind of too inspiring, I guess, from my Cornell initiation.
I relate to that a little bit. I'm originally from Los Angeles, and so when I had applied to Cornell, I honestly hadn't heard much about Cornell in the past. I was really into schools in New York City for some reason, and I was like, okay, I think I can, out of Columbia and Cornell, I was like, maybe I can get into Cornell a little bit more than Columbia, and I ended up applying there. Had no clue we were 4 hours away from the city.
So you really wanted to be in cold weather, I guess, which is surprising in California.
Yeah, I don't know if I knew that was what it entailed coming here, but, nice surprise, and, it's been good so far.
Yeah.
But, similar to you, I know you were a double major here in applied economics and management as well as communication. I am a double major myself. And, I fear a lot of the time and throughout the past couple years that if I drop one major, then my educational time won't be as sort of fulfilled and won't be as valuable. So how important do you think it was for you to double major, and why specifically those majors?
Yeah, I definitely hear you on the value piece.
Yeah.
I remember thinking in my head, I'm paying the same price whether I do one major or two, so why not just go for it? So I definitely had a lot of those thoughts. But so I started off as a communication major. I started at some point taking a bunch of classes in the Dyson, I guess, AIM. I don't even know if people say AIM anymore, but the Dyson School. And primarily because I just started to enjoy them, but also almost every one of my very good friends was an AIM or Dyson major.
Okay.
So I was like, well, I'll just hang out with them and take some classes. And it turned out, at some point I looked down and I was like 70% of the way towards fulfilling the Dyson requirements. So at that point I was kind of just like, I'm gonna go for it. But funny enough, like both of communication and the business part have both played a role in my journey, which, I don't know, looking back, it was a good decision. It was like extra work, but it's been kind of fun and kind of personally rewarding to see that play out.
Yeah, I think it's been really nice for me to see how my technical skills from my stats major and at the same time being able to articulate my findings with my comms major has been super, super helpful throughout my time. But sort of talking more a little bit about your Cornell experience, what's a memory you think really fondly of?
Good question.
I'm sure there's many.
Yeah. Well, I guess the first one I have to say, hopefully my wife Lauren will watch this at some point, but or hear this. But so we met at Cornell. So I think that, I don't know if it's a single memory, but the experience of meeting is probably the thing that stands out most about my experience. But some of my best friends that I have today were from Cornell. We've all been, now that we're pretty old at this point, and 12 years after, a little over 12 years after graduating, a bunch of us have gotten married. We've been in each other's weddings. Some people have 2 kids already. So just those general experiences, building kind of friendships that have continued on. Another good memory, but meeting my wife, definitely number one.
Yeah, was she originally from New York?
Yeah, so Lauren grew up in New York City.
Okay.
So that's where we live now, and I don't think I'll ever get my fence in a yard. I think I married into this knowing that she was a New York City forever type of person. So we're making it work for now. But and so Lauren grew up in New York City. Both her parents went to Cornell as well, so I married
Wow.
into this
Cornell family.
this Cornell family, which has been great.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is such a unique place where we come across people that we might have never met otherwise, and it's been super awesome for me to get to know so many people from different parts of the world with different views and different experiences. And I think I, as someone who is a senior now and, will be an alumni soon, I think I always think of how I'll be able to come back as an alumni and sort of make the experience even better than, as great as it already is for me. And I know you're part of the Comm advisory
I
board.
was just going to say that's one thing you can do.
Yeah. And so with the Comm advisory board, you help guide the department's vision and growth. So where do you hope to see the department's curriculum, events, programs go in the future?
Yeah, so I think the Comm department's pretty unique in that they have like a very active advisory board. And it's something that I knew sort of existed when I was an undergrad.
Yeah.
But after graduating, started to realize that this was actually a thing that was pretty involved. And getting, again, another excuse to come back up to campus every year for an annual meeting didn't hurt. But I think I guess going back to your question about what I'd like to see happen, I think the Comm department's always been unique in not just being a school focused on helping figure out how to use a camera or how to write a specific piece of journalism, but much more of why are you writing a piece of journalism?
Yeah.
What kind of why will this piece of writing evoke a certain feeling from the audience? How do you go about kind of distributing in an effective way? Things like that from a psychological perspective. So all of that's super important, but figuring out how you kind of blend in some of the kind of practical natures of the quote-unquote real world into the curriculum in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's being accomplished more and more through kind of trips to New York City that the department's doing to expose people and students to kind of different careers in the media industry and beyond, but also doing a focus on kind of data and data analysis as part of the curriculum, I think is also pretty helpful to prepare students for what it's like to sit at a desk, theoretical desk one day looking at an Excel spreadsheet or some sort of group of numbers and not just having your eyes glaze over.
Yeah, I think that's what I love about the sort of curriculum we have at Cornell, because it's so different than other communication departments, where we really get such a diverse range of skills to go into the professional world, and I constantly see that in the internships that I do and things like that. So I want to move over a little bit to your professional time. And so I was able to see that after Cornell, your first job was in investment banking at Miller Buckfire. So how did Cornell play a role in sort of getting you that job or helping you know that you wanted to go into investment banking?
Yeah. I don't know if anyone really wants to ever go into investment banking. I think part of it, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I still sometimes don't know exactly what I want to do, but no idea what I wanted to do when I was leaving Cornell. And investment banking just felt like a thing people do that you can learn a bunch of stuff in a pretty short amount of time, and you make a little bit of money, but then you can figure out, use it as kind of an extension of figuring out exactly what you might want to do after that. So I adopted that mindset, and I did a bunch of the on-campus recruiting, but wound up getting my first job, and I worked at a small investment bank that was focused on an area called restructuring, which is bankruptcy and debt advisory stuff. So a little bit kind of more complex than what typical investment banking is like.
Yeah.
I wound up getting my job just through cold emailing someone at the firm, because I think they only recruited at Penn and one other school or something. Wow. So it was pretty small. But yeah, so I jumped into that world and did not really know what I was in for.
Do you think cold emailing is still something today that stands out to you? If someone reaches out to you and is like, this is...
Yes. Yeah. I think it's probably changed a little bit with LinkedIn wasn't as big of a thing but it's still the same concept. But I don't know. I still think it's a pretty underused tactic.
I agree.
I actually, so my, I've gotten 2 jobs. So my first job was through just a cold email.
Yeah.
And then another one of my first job in venture capital, which I'm sure we'll go into later, came just by sending an email to the head of the group at the time, just saying hi and why I think I could be a good fit for the role, and things progressed from there. So I don't know. I'm a big proponent of it, but now, I do tend to respond to most things I get just to pay it forward because it's been so helpful for me.
Yeah, I agree. I work on campus with ALPFA, a Latino professional club, and I'm the VP of professional development, and I kind of emphasize this idea that as we progress, as a society, I think personal branding has become so important for, different career fields, and that comes through like LinkedIn and making sure that people know what you're up to and, how your experiences will be valuable in roles. And so it's really nice to hear that you do reply to those. I am also a huge fan of cold emails and have myself gotten a lot of cool experiences to talk to people. So
I still remember my subject line for my emails when I was here was questions from a Cornell student.
Oh, wow.
And that was got a lot of responses from Cornell alumni and beyond. People are, especially playing the student card is always pretty helpful.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I always push people to do things like that.
Yeah, I agree. And so moving forward, after a year of investment banking, you went and worked at BuzzFeed, which BuzzFeed is incredibly iconic, I think, in the digital media world. I think Washington Post called them a digital media pioneer, which I have to agree. Why did you decide to make that jump, and what was the shift in culture like, which I assume there was one?
Crazy shift. So I was... So I went into investment banking not knowing exactly what I was getting into, and I think I was probably the worst investment banking analyst to ever come out of Cornell, ever. And there were a bunch of different reasons for that. I think, obviously, a lot of people talk about the lifestyle and the hours and the uncertainty, but I think that was just amplified for me just because I didn't really understand what I was getting into. I didn't really have an interest in deep finance work. And just that lack of real passion for the general type of work I was doing, really, I think impacted my, it's a lot easier to put up with all the hours and uncertainty and all of that stuff when you actually kind of enjoy the overarching piece of what you're doing. And for me, it was a lot more difficult. So I started looking for new jobs probably within 6 months after starting. It took a little while. I wasn't really looking at startups specifically, but kind of going back to my Cornell journey, there was a person I was good friends with here who started at BuzzFeed as a recruiter, and I didn't really know what BuzzFeed was. I sort of knew. This was in 2013, so they probably had 180 people at the time, so a lot smaller than they are today. And she posted that BuzzFeed was looking for someone to work on their finance and strategy team. So I was like, this sounds pretty cool. Yeah. And this is kind of where my comm background comes into play, and my journalistic kind of desires from way, way back in high school came in. But I remember during my interview, my boss who hired me, she was actually... I don't know if she was editor-in-chief, but her senior writer at the Harvard Crimson when she was there for undergrad. Cool. So we talked a lot about kind of that and my experience as a communication major and kind of interest in being at the intersection of media and business. And so I was fortunate enough to kind of jump onto that crazy ride for about 3 years. But yeah, so it was just kind of, I guess, through most job shifts or luck and timing. So it was... a combination of those two. Yeah.
I mean, BuzzFeed it has been so iconic. I mean, that is one of the big names that I think for me growing up, and I'm sure for you as well, was so iconic.
Growing up, I feel so old.
Yeah. in how we consumed news and media as teenagers to young adults. It was awesome. And I mean, you touched on this a little bit, but many students at Cornell, and I'm sure a lot of other institutions, like myself, we feel this urgency to jump into investment banking or venture capital or finance. And something that I found was, The Guardian conducted surveys in 2021 and showed that first-year analyst mental health declined after working at Goldman Sachs in investment banking.
Yeah.
So as someone that went into investment banking yourself, what's your advice to students like myself or other students here at Cornell who may be thinking of going into these career fields?
Yeah, I mean, I guess number one advice is just know what you're getting into. I mean, I think they are, like, even when I was working at BuzzFeed, I was doing a lot of the company's, like, financial projections and thinking about if we were going to release a new type of product, how could we analyze how impactful that product could be to the audience kind of growth, if we were launching in a new country, which country might make sense to launch in based on a bunch of different pieces of data. So whenever anyone needed to kind of analyze numbers or financial metrics, they would come to me to do it.
Wow.
And I found myself doing these, I only knew how to do these things because I spent time in investment banking.
Right.
So in hindsight, it was awesome because I was thinking about, I spent, 15 months in investment banking and learned a lot that allowed me to go into my next company and be kind of a guru in spreadsheets and Excel and projections and financial modeling and turning all that stuff into presentations that we would go to the board and the CEO. So I looked back on it then and was like, that really sucked, but at least I took away some things from it. So I don't know, it's all about the attitude. So making sure talking to other Cornellians who have gone into that world, making sure you're just kind of prepared for everything you're getting into. But there are tons of rewards that come from it. So it makes sense why people do it. And there are a lot of surveys that, like you just mentioned, that unfortunately have come out, and a lot of the banks are doing things to make it a little bit easier. Basic level of, I don't know if basic is the right word, but I guess solid grasp of data analysis and being able to kind of navigate a spreadsheet is just obviously most jobs coming out of Cornell, that's kind of table stakes. So it does seem like things have progressed to the point where lots of students are coming out with those skills, which is awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, as we move forward a little bit, in 2016, you jumped into venture capital with Time Warner Investments. So how did you think your previous experiences at BuzzFeed and Miller Buckfire sort of led you up to venture capital?
Yeah, so 4 years out of school, I was jumping to job number 3, which was a little bit wild. So it's been definitely has been a non-linear path to where I am now, and I think that's another thing I don't know, try to impart on. My cousin just graduated actually from Cornell last year,
nice. And
career paths very rarely just go exactly how you think they're going to go. But anyway, so I started at Time Warner in 2016, and this was a venture capital group that was part of a big company. So Time Warner owned HBO, and they owned Warner Brothers, and they owned Turner, so a massive media conglomerate. And our group invested in startups that were trying to define the future of digital media. So, and this was one of the jobs where I sent a cold email to a woman named Allison, who they were hiring for an associate role on their team to help with investment evaluation and execution. So I just reached out to her, and I think, my background was oddly perfect for it, given that I knew how to do the financial side of the business from investment banking, of the role. I knew digital media from my time at BuzzFeed, so combining those was pretty logical. So I was very lucky to kind of find that place. And Allison has shown up in my career arc, has shown up now, which I could talk about later as well. But it's cool to see that part as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think venture capital is a really interesting industry, and I definitely barely learned about it, I want to say a year ago, but it's such a cool industry. I mean, for someone that doesn't know what venture capital is, can you talk a little bit about what your job duties are?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. Sometimes I wonder exactly what my job is, but I think there's always nuance to any kind of industry, but at kind of the core of it, the job of anyone in venture capital is to find really amazing entrepreneurs who are building really amazing businesses
Yeah.
and giving them resources to help build those businesses. So, and a lot of these are very long-term ideas that will take 5-10 years in the future to kind of play out. So you have to be patient.
Yeah.
You don't really get any immediate feedback because you have to wait to see, 10, 15 years. Is this company going to do really well? Is it going to sell it could be acquired? Is it going to go public? You just don't know at the time. So you're really making kind of pretty risky investments. And the whole name of the game is to find the absolute best people who are have like really transformational ideas and kind of get the privilege of investing in them. And then usually you join the company on the board or an observer on the board, and you get to kind of be a part of that journey and provide guidance throughout the process. So that's like a very high level.
Yeah.
But I guess to kind of simplify it probably across most venture capital stages and types of functions, most of the job is meeting with companies. So figuring out what markets and types of problems are kind of most pressing for certain kind of sectors, whatever sector you're focused on. What are the companies that are building transformational technologies to address those problems? And how do you find those companies? How do you kind of win their trust? How do you ultimately kind of go through an investment and evaluation process and then go on that maybe 5-10 year journey with a company as they build the business?
Wow. And I mean, can you talk a little bit about what you look for in a business to decide if it's a good investment? I mean, I imagine it's a little bit of the business itself, but also maybe the entrepreneur who is pitching it and is passionate about it. Is that something you look at as well to know if maybe this is something we will trust in?
Yeah. Good. How much time do we have? No. Yeah. I don't know. A lot. Like I've been in venture for 6 years now, so I'm just starting to get. I spent time at a startup, which is pretty helpful. 2 startups actually, pretty helpful. But I'm just starting to kind of see some of the pattern recognition that a lot of long-term investors talk about. So they can kind of meet a founder and say, "Huh, this person reminds me of these 3 people who I invested in 17 years ago, and those 3 people are pretty successful, so that's just a data point I'm going to keep in my mind as I'm evaluating the company." I'm just starting to have some of that, but in terms of what we look for from a people perspective, a lot of it is just based on the founder's story and like what makes them uniquely suited to solve a particular problem. So, and like some people refer to that as founder market fit. So what about this founder makes them kind of gives them a competitive advantage versus anyone else who may be doing this. So one example is we invested at my current firm, Comcast Ventures, in a startup called Populous, which is helping cities around the world to kind of digitize their curb space. So being able to put into a piece of software what are the rules associated with the corner of 28th and Madison in New York City. How long can someone idle there? Can you park there? Can you not park there? Et cetera, et cetera. Right. And the co-founders of this business both have PhDs in transportation systems. They had spent their entire careers and their doctoral theses kind of thinking about this exact problem. So among our kind of different types of analysis for this company, I think knowing that this was really their life's work was pretty important for us to decide to invest.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely trust them. I mean, as you mentioned Comcast Ventures, which is where you are now as a partner, I imagine, I mean, I would feel a lot of pressure to know, what to invest in if, I'm being backed by, Comcast. Yep. So is there pressures in your role? How do you feel now being a partner looking back?
Yeah, definitely some pressure. But different kind of pressure, I think, than I had before. Like, I think earlier in your career, a lot more of the job is executing. So someone else would kind of find a good investment to take a look at, and then I would be the person behind the scenes doing the analysis to say, is this worthwhile or not from a financial and kind of numbers perspective? Yeah. Now, like, I still do some of that, but a lot more of the job is thinking at, like, what categories should we, like, look to invest in? Yeah. Like what is meaningful to Comcast, and then thinking through some of those more qualitative aspects as well about a founder's background and the teams that they've been able to recruit and kind of bring on board, and do they have that kind of founder market fit to really build something big and transformational. I think it's helpful to work at a company in doing venture capital versus kind of just being a more pure financially driven venture firm, because at Comcast we're focused on a handful of categories to invest in that we think could be kind of long-term growth drivers for the business.
Yeah.
So they're usually not areas where Comcast is active in today. So Comcast is a big internet and media company, so we're not doing a lot of kind of media-focused investing. Instead, we're focused on, like, I spend a lot of my time in AI, which is like the topic of the several years at this point. Cybersecurity is another area where I spend time, but also kind of energy and climate tech. So it's pretty broad in scope, but we're able to kind of help refine our investment themes by working with people at the company, which is a cool part about the corporate venture ecosystem that I like.
Yeah. How big is your team?
So we're pretty small. So we're 5 people on the investment team. Okay. We're based in New York. The company has a kind of 2 beautiful, massive towers in Philadelphia. Oh, wow. So I'm kind of back and forth a decent amount. Thankfully, it's not too bad of a trip. But I'm a big Amtrak fan, if you've ever taken it.
Yeah.
So 5 people on the investment team, and then we have 2 individuals who help us out on the finance side, and then a few other kind of folks within the company. So it's pretty small, but I don't know. I feel like I've always been on smallish teams, and something I like.
You know, something that this previous summer I was an intern at Apple in finance, and something that I talked.
I should be interviewing you.
I don't know. Something that I talked to a lot of the managers about and mentors that I have was sort of this idea that a lot of these like technical industries like finance, venture capital, obviously people are incredibly smart. They have high IQ levels. But sometimes where we've kind of noticed is like maybe they lack a little bit of the EQ, the more emotional side.
No.
You know? And so
Next question. Okay.
Yeah. So like I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about that. I think we're in an era where mental health and being sort of open about these things in your job is very common, and we talked a little bit about mental health declining from the study. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, a bunch of thoughts, but I think I think a lot of it comes with like the career progression that I talked about. So usually when you're, at least I think it's a pretty common path. So when you're younger in your career, you're doing a lot of the execution work. So someone brings you a project and you crunch the numbers, you make a presentation, you package something together really, really beautifully, and kind of on you go. Yeah. I think in venture, especially kind of once you reach a certain level, a lot more of it is kind of building relationships with other venture investors, building relationships with founders. And if you have kind of a low EQ, it's probably not going to work out too well for you. Yeah. So I think that's like a part of the job that I honestly had to adjust for and kind of have grown and evolved to figure out like how do you really kind of build relationships that aren't just transactional? Yeah. Because then no one's going to really want to talk to you if you're only kind of going into any conversation saying like, what can I get out of this for me as quickly as possible? Yeah. It just doesn't really work in like an industry that's so long-term focused. So, and I think like from an advice perspective, probably the best piece of advice I got kind of in that regard was around vulnerability. So I don't know, no one likes to talk to someone who has it all figured, like pretends they have it all figured out and their life is absolutely perfect and everything is going super, super well. It's one, it's not true, and 2, it's just not interesting. Yeah. So I don't know, being able to like really show some like genuine vulnerability during conversations. Like, I don't know, we don't have everything figured out. Yeah. Like, I'm a new parent. It's really hard. Like, we're juggling a million things, and being able to like talk about those things, I think, has helped me in my role just build kind of more meaningful relationships.
Do you think that sort of vulnerability aspect is something that, you know, now as a partner, as a leader in your space, do you think you try to implement constantly?
Yes, all the time. Like even with kind of members of our team that are kind of earlier on in their career, it's something like we all stress is like the human, especially in something like venture investing where it's such a people-driven business. Yeah. like we're not robots, we're not machines. Everything isn't great all the time, and kind of the not robots piece I think is really important to talk about and to kind of just instill as part of a culture. And that's something we, especially in our group, try to do.
Yeah. I mean, moving forward, I mean, how do you see your career sort of evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? You're a dad now.
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm pretty happy right now, thankfully, knock on wood. So after kind of having a little bit of a zigzaggy arc from investment banking for a hot minute to startup land, to venture, back to a startup, and now kind of back in venture, I think I reserve the right to change my mind, but I think this is kind of where I see my doing what I want to do when I grow up. I think I found it, which is great.
Yeah.
I like doing it for companies because you have that kind of added level of kind of big support behind you, being part of a crazy large 180,000 person company,
Wow.
which is nuts to even think about. So kind of seeing how I can kind of grow and develop within kind of this corporate venture ecosystem, I think is what I want to do. So I'm going to keep going until someone tells me to stop.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, do you have any advice for a communication major about what industries they should be looking into?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a hard question. I don't know why I said yeah. I mean, I think just having some bit, like especially your first job doesn't have to be it almost unlike it will never be. I don't want to say never because my mother-in-law only worked for one company her entire. She worked at IBM for 41 years.
Wow.
But it'll almost never be the only job you have. Okay. But you should have just some kind of interest in like the function you're doing or the industry you're in, because I think it'll just make you better at the job and you'll have a better attitude about it. And basically do everything I didn't do when I went into investment banking, I think is the moral of that story.
Yeah, super important to hear, I think, for me as a senior, almost out. It's tradition around here, Mark, that we end with rapid fire questions. So I hope you're ready. Are you ready to start?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. What song is on repeat right now?
What song is that? Okay. A song called OMG by Jose Iglesias and Pitbull. Actually, The remix just came out, and I'm a very big New York Mets fan, and they're going through a magical run in the playoffs right now. Hopefully they can continue it.
Yeah.
And Jose Iglesias is a player on the Mets, and he also happens to have a #1 single with Pitbull.
Wow.
So big song.
Best vacation?
My wife and I did a bike trip a few years ago in the Pyrenees Mountains.
Nice.
So we biked through Spain and France and a ridiculous amount of hills, but despite the pain during those uphill climbs, probably the most memorable.
Nice. I think you just answered this, but Mets or Yankees?
Not even a question. That's
What was your last Google search?
my last Google search. I guess honestly it was figuring out what time the Mets game is tonight. Which is at 5 o'clock.
What's your favorite restaurant in New York City?
Restaurant. I'm a sucker for really good pizza, so there's a place near my office called Ruby Rosa in Soho. So I guess that would be #1.
Nice. Texting or talking?
Talking.
Okay. Favorite?
Come on, you couldn't tell?
Comms majors, right?
Yeah.
Favorite social media app?
Instagram.
Okay.
I'll have to
Finish the sentence. I can't live without.
AirPods.
Okay. Favorite quote?
All right, I'm digging back to my high school yearbook quote here, but still relevant. Time you enjoy wasting is not wasted.
Wow.
John Lennon. Still really believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. If you could have dinner with any celebrity, who would it be?
Oh, jeez. I'm going to pick my favorite Met, Mike Piazza.
Nice. Last book you read?
I just finished a 3-book series called Beartown, which is about a hockey team in way in I think it's Canada, northern Canada, or a fictional area. So completely not business related. I try to not read too many business books because I work
In
every day, all
business,
day.
yeah.
I need a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
But that was it.
And lastly, best advice ever given to you?
Cop out, because I said it before about the vulnerability piece.
Yeah.
People aren't machines. Don't act like it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I had a lot of fun getting to know you a little bit.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah, and excited to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
Nice. We did 41, right?
41. Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Perfect.
How do you think we did? Okay.
Great. Yeah.
Was it good?